we expect
Another out of that.
Joanna? The moment. No issues. Host tools, that's web access.
Do they allow participants to start video? I'm checking that. There's a window.
There you go. Allow all participants to, okay.
You can turn off.
Is that loud?
Mistakes.
Oh, yeah. Like, I don't know. It's about the city.
Like me.
Are you gonna do some of our?
You could hide profile pictures too. I feel like at this point, you might be willing to.
So-
It's 40 evens.
Okay, we're gonna. Great. Forward.
It's also- YouTube recording.
All right, I will then call to order this second monthly meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. Do we have any changes to the agenda? I do have one item to add to new business. It is a resolution related to the police department, which I will explain when we get there. Item number 3 on the agenda is our first public comment period. We do have another one at the end of the meeting. But if any member of the public would like to comment now, we have time. Yes, ma'am.
Orange Shells, Village of Trumansburg. Last June, I think it was, I came to you with concern about attending memorial service for somebody at the Sibley Funeral Home that aligned with the May Day run. And I asked them if, when I think they have to apply to be able to have that run, if they could change the route to avoid being in front of that Sibley. And I don't know what came of that discussion. But when I saw the route map again, it looks like they're still going to be going down South Street. Is there time to see if that can be changed this year? To avoid what happened last year?
Have they applied for the permit already? For the May Day 5K?
They have, but let me verify where that is in process. So but even so, we can make an amendment.
I mean, I don't know whether that's been addressed because the May Day 5K, as you know, is run by a separate organization. But we could check just to see.
Because I didn't know if it required permit from you as well to approve that site. I thought
It
I saw
does.
something
It does.
along the way that said the streets aren't closed. You know, so there will be traffic, but that was the difficulty last year during this memorial service. To have
Sure.
lights full running, and if they could just change that route to go up along by the middle school and up by the bus.
And
garage.
yeah,
It seems like we would cover the same amount of territory, but I don't know what regulations they need to follow to be an official run if that can all happen. But I would just like to know that discussion happened.
We should check with the organizers tomorrow.
okay. Yep, and Maureen, I think I have your contact information, so I can get back to you with an answer.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Kate, anything?
Just Kate from IHS, I'm just here to answer any questions if anyone has any items or report here.
Okay, then we will move right along to our item number 4, which is our formal public hearing on proposed local law D1 of 2025, which is our annual tax cap override. For those who are not familiar, back in 2011 or 12, New York State passed a law which limited how much municipalities can increase their tax levy without a formal override process. Given the realities of funding various departments, primarily emergency services related, we have chosen to override the tax levy limitations every year since, even when we haven't needed to increase the levy, just to make sure we have the flexibility to adopt a budget that we need to adopt. And so here we are again with local law D1 of proposed local law D1 of 2025, which would allow the Board of Trustees to raise our tax levy greater than the override amount. So I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing on proposed local law D1 of 2025.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So now we are now in our public hearing on proposed local law D1 of 2025. If any member of the public would like to comment on it. If you're joining us online and you'd like to comment, you'll need to use the raise hand feature.
You answered my question, if you ever did have to go over the cap, you just put this in as a safety net in case you need to, but you have not gone over the cap in case.
We regularly go over the cap every year.
You do.
So tax, so
I'm sorry, I
even
thought you said no.
as we've approved this local law every year, even if we have not needed it.
Okay.
Although we've held our tax rate flat for the last 6 or 7 years, the levy is increasing every year by more than, there's a formula, but it's generally around 2%. So our levy has increased by more than 2% routinely.
I will note that I received no written communications regarding this matter.
Hearing open for a few more minutes. He's just in time.
Can you, yeah,
Like to stand or be seated?
I don't know how long it's been.
Okay.
Well, we are in our public hearing on the tax cap override proposal. Bruce, if you had any comments?
Yeah, I was curious, what the reasoning for it. Cause I sent an email out that I complained today about the ADA inaccessibility.
You're inquiring about the reasons for the proposed law?
Well, it's changing this. Just curious.
Yeah, so in 2012, New York State passed a law which limited how much we can raise our tax levy without passing this law. We passed this law every year since to give us the flexibility to adopt a budget that would allow for our tax levy to increase by more than 2%. Our emergency services departments cost a lot of money, and so we have needed to raise our levy by more than 2%. From time to time. This would be another year where we would need to do that. So we're adopting the local law to give us the flexibility to do that.
Yeah, I was curious about those things, comes in handy, granted the county. Services on that, those issues, back in the old days, they used to be volunteer services.
Mhm.
And I just wondering why now expenses go up. Or is there volunteer still?
There are almost no volunteer ambulance. In fact, there are no volunteer paramedics. We have one in Trumansburg. There are generally speaking no or very few volunteer paramedics anywhere in Tompkins County. We do have some volunteer EMTs who lend a hand from time to time, and other departments. Enfield Fire has volunteer EMTs. But paramedic level advanced life support care is almost entirely paid.
Yeah, just curious, really, because they never had the information, ability to find out all those details and. But the board meetings and stuff are only in Windows Word. And it's not handicap accessible, and I can't, even on your Windows computer, I can't even open it up to read.
Yeah, we talk about this quite often. We address it at our State of the Village every year. All of these meetings are, of course, recorded.
Yeah, I didn't get into that, like I discovered it today. But I wanted to go get the, at least the minutes meeting, but I couldn't open that. That was docs issues and whatever things I couldn't have any accessibility to.
Okay.
Well, that's the reason why I raised them and getting more equipment sooner or later that I have to pay for myself. Because like the old days, that stuff used to be given under the commission for blind. That's the reason why I question things like this, because more money gets spent and less money gets sort of sent out to other people. And I feel that's probably the reason why the commission for the blind has died, because a lot of money is going elsewhere. But yeah, that was the one I was curious about.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully, I want accessibility can get better in the future.
Okay.
But, go from there, I guess.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, and the other things that are mentioned in the email, because it took me until last year because of handicap inaccessibility down at the county. But I did find out who stole my land when it happened. And like I said, in the past, I didn't label for things, but it took somebody in the county to expose them. And the properties around me, like the dumpsters and stuff, is actually my land. But like I said, the people that did it and our county officials, they literally didn't file the paperwork and also took the property and had the surveyor come out and resurvey the land in 1992, 2 years after I bought it. But I gave you minor details of it. In other words, the details of who and what and where.
Okay. I'll take a look.
Yeah, but anyway, like I said, John O'Leary is the one who did it, and he worked for the county at the time. And the other one, well, there's several of the people, local people.
Well,
Anyway, yeah, anyway, so yeah, I'm just curious about it, because
okay.
expenses and money, and I don't want to see anything wasted or used.
Understood.
All right,
Bruce, let me assist you if I may.
what's that?
May I assist you with the door?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Bruce.
Riley, it got lost coming here.
Sure. There's 2 doors, Riley. Here's one. And then there's one in there.
Any other public comment on proposed local law D1 of 2025? Not, then I would entertain a motion to close our public hearing of proposed local law D1 of 2025.
I'm going Darther Carver in that.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now out of our public hearing on proposed local law D1 of 2025. So unless there's any more discussion, which we can certainly have if necessary, I would entertain a motion to adopt proposed local law D1 of 2025 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments, questions, concerns?
I feel like I've made an elaborate comment on this for the last 10 years. Just gonna bite my tongue this year.
Is it
That I've made comments. No, I think it's been around for long, but I've bitten my tongue a couple times maybe in the last 12 years.
Right, if there's no other comments or questions, then all in favor of adopting proposed local law D1 in 2025, please say aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, everybody. Item number 5 is old business. I'm hoping everyone's had a chance to do a final review of our proposed budget for 25-26. Any comments, thoughts, edits, suggestions, complaints?
Did you want to review the EMS monitor lease line A27A?
Nope.
Okay,
Nice.
Long-standing issue.
fantastic.
Anybody notice anything else that needs addressing? Are we comfortable with that budget? Are we comfortable with keeping the tax rate flat again?
Yes. Fine.
Begrudging.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you'll notice the public hearing
Yep,
on the budget for 4/14.
Yep.
Which is our annual organizational meeting. You do discover any mistakes or edits, let Jessica know in the next 12 hours before she notices the
I'll be watching.
public hearing.
Okay.
Okay. Next item is sidewalk repair conversation. Again, I hope everyone had a chance to read Guy's email from many weeks ago now at this point. I would like to be able to get back to a couple of residents that have asked about this, kind of let them know what our stance is. I would love to be able to say that there's a way for us to help with the cost of some sidewalk somewhere. That would be my preference. But I think Guy raises a lot of valid legal concerns with how that decision making is done. How we avoid making it potentially inequitable. So I'll open it up to thoughts and comments from anyone about it.
No, I agree. I think there's no good way to do it, so if there isn't a good way, I think we probably should not enter into that.
I think I disagree. I think we can do something, like I said at the last meeting, 2 meetings ago. There's something analogous to the tree program here. I think Guy's tendency is to be generally skeptical, which I think is appropriate for an attorney. But similar to, library funding, tree program, all of those things, I think if we have a specific plan, we can ask him if he sees any specific problems with it. It's just hard to, right, he's initially going to be skeptical and risk averse, and that's sort of his job. And until we come with something more specific, we will always be about that. I think it's a public good that, as you point out, I think we want to be invested in. We don't have a good comprehensive system for updating all of the slate, all of the obviously dangerous sidewalks throughout the village. And this gets us maybe a small step, but at least a step closer. I think we should at least come up with something, some rough idea. Again, I think to me, just because of, I built out the tree thing, that plan to me feels analogous, and I think it would be easy to make something that works. Right, and we basically define the public good, define whatever. I know there's, right, Ben and I talked about this a little bit, and there's definitely some sticking points.
But could you remind us, what are the salient points of the tree, the structure of the tree?
So the tree program is basically. Was based on. Establishing risk for trees, right, so. We ran through our volunteer committee ran through. All of the trees with an inventory of all of the street trees, so within the public rights of way in the village. Assessed risk based on sort of the National Society of Arborists. Risk matrix, basically a little bit boiled down, right? Like it's all volunteers, non-professionals. So we boiled it down so that we could all do it in an approachable way. Ranked all of the most dangerous trees, sent out sort of what I would call an invitation to the owners of those trees to say. Your tree has been identified as dangerous. Here is the incentive that's available to you. If you do it within X amount of time, we can, provide a small but not insignificant financial incentive. So that's the crux, right? We identified the public good and the reason, and then provided info for our support.
Yeah, I think that is my light understanding of this is like the key parts, right? That we are taking this. You're stepping away from the. I don't know, not the approach that we take, but like, you could imagine that. A village resident, come and say, hey, I put in a sidewalk, can you give me money? Like, that's not the way to go.
Right, that's very true.
But we can instead take a different approach and say, hey, we have identified a public good that the village wants. I could foresee some sort of a ranking approach of like, hey, we want them on these streets more than these other streets. We prioritize in some way, and then we can approach certain people and certain streets and residents and say, we've identified a need here. We're willing to, support addressing that need through these manners, and then also is gets to something that we continue to talk about of like having some sort of prioritization of sidewalks just for the DPW. Like they come back to me like, hey, new budget, new year, what are we doing? It's like, so like I went back to looked at the sidewalk study, the walkability study from like 15 years ago. I'm like, well, the ideas aren't terrible, maybe we dust that off. But there is like that's the extent of what we've thought here, right? So I think if we want to move forward with this, it probably does require some amount of, like, to your point, identifying what's the actual need, prioritizing that a bit, and then making a program of it, which I think would be the way forward if you want to go forward. That would be the way I'd suggest.
But the distinction is sort of the retrospective versus proactive, right? So I think retrospective is part of it to avoid guys' criticisms there. It's not to say that the people who already brought this to us would necessarily be kicked out of or exempt from any proactive program, but just that they would be incorporated into a larger thing rather than. So, but to me, I think that's this, or that's
Yeah,
incremental.
and I was trying to remember what the heck I had thought about this, and I looked back at the email. It feels similar to that. I was kind of like, maybe there's a grant program sort of approach, but it's kind of the same idea. Like you are establishing a specific need, and you're at the grant program would have more of a like people can submit up into a date, and then we can like make a decision, which might help a little bit with fairness of like whoever does the work first gets the money and then it runs out. But like I don't know that we run into that problem. We typically have leftover at the end of the year, and so it may be a problem that we don't actually have to worry about.
Yeah, or I mean, I expected the sign-up rate for the tree program to be much higher. In the first couple of years that we used money, right? And that's it's tailed off, right? The people who seem to maybe be like waiting, chomping at the bit for that program, there was 7 or 8 of them, and then there was it's just a couple people, maybe, and maybe sidewalks similar, maybe it's not.
Yeah.
So you're saying approach it from the aspect of maybe we determine what is a more practical, walkable part of the village that we might be willing to compensate, right?
Or just that we prioritize and we proactively create a program
Right.
rather than reacting to proposals for
Right.
specific resident, specific cases, because I think that starts to feel a lot like gifting. Right, and if we have a program that's focused on village priorities, public priorities first.
Right,
And then extrapolates from there, it's a completely, it flips. Flips the
flips
script a
this,
little.
yes, it does.
To be totally frank, though, I don't feel like that raised that sort of program, well, interesting and like, it doesn't rise to the level of you feel like I would personally be spending time on finding out sidewalks and whatnot. I don't remember, have we talked about like, is the street tree committee interested in looking at something like that? Or at least,
I mean, you can see in our budget numbers, right, the street tree committee's attention and time. Has been tailing off the last 2 to 3 years. Right, so we could transition, we made the one attempt at a sidewalk.
right,
And I think. Ultimately, while well-intentioned, maybe we lacked sort of the volunteer spirit that the tree committee had, so maybe we can kind of transition that, I'd certainly be willing to ask them.
I think it'd be interesting, because I think there's value there. But I'm wary of the point that you made of like, there's a half dozen people who are really interested, and then it kind of tails off after that, and. I think about all the other pieces on my plate right now, like,
There are definitely, I mean, there's other concerns too, right, like. With a tree can exist in the middle of nowhere without being connected to other trees, so like. The location gets ranked based on. The presumed traffic underneath the tree, right, like that factors into the risk assessment. But a sidewalk isn't quite analogous because one piece of the sidewalk. Disconnected from the rest of the system, it doesn't have the same value.
right,
So there's definitely more complexity in the sidewalk system and the sidewalk program if we were to make one,
yeah,
but I don't think it's insurmountable.
I don't think it is, and I think there's a way to combine that with. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting, right,
I could certainly ask, to be perfectly frank, I have been a couple months behind in setting up a meeting with the tree committee. And so this would be a perfect opportunity to discuss it and to start moving that forward. So I'm happy to pursue that as long as this isn't something that we all just kind of put behind this. You know what I mean? I don't want to do it
right,
if
yeah,
there's no interest.
there has to be,
Yeah.
I would be interested in having a proposal here to like. Think about and maybe, suggest changes or whatnot to move forward with. I don't, yeah, if it came before us, I think that'd be very interesting to talk about.
I can certainly ask if there's.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, how old is the walkability study?
It's old and there's definitely.
Yeah. We haven't changed it much.
So I think that's the thing, like, it's old, but it's not right, it's not terribly out of whack. I think the difference that I see. Is more in our changing evolution of like what we want to see for the village itself. Like, I think there are some areas where. I know this Ben and I have talked about, like, they recommend, I pulled it up, so I was looking at the DPW issues there. They recommend Camp Street. I don't think there's any reason that sidewalks.
No,
Right, so like, I think there's some kind of. Decision making we can make at this level of like, what of this plan makes or makes not, or doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
But there is a strong, like, a lot of the other parts that they mentioned. We have 100%, like, I went through, I was like, oh yeah, we did Union Street, we did Elm Street, we could consider the side of Elm Street, like, they highlighted a lot of places that actually make a ton of sense, and up West Main, which we're doing. Safe routes to schools, Lake Street, like, a lot of these things have actually come through. And we've kind of prioritized them largely in the order that they recommended, so. The next big stretch was Cuba Street, which we've always kind of hemmed and hawed on, but the more I was thinking about their recommendation and how it might connect to the future Black Diamond Trail and how there's a lot of unsafe slate already that probably should come out either which way, and then do we put something back in there? There's reasons why that could be an interesting stretch to maybe think about prioritizing. It's also something that like is straightforward enough that there can be community builds, which is both a bonus and also sometimes makes it more complex to then actually ask people to pay money that maybe they just wait to get a community build. I don't know how to think about those things, but I think there's interesting conversation.
There, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need build with communities.
mhm.
I think,
Yeah.
The Elm Street part from Juniper, from whatever the bed and breakfast is called now, it's
Right.
been. From there to Juniper has always been a concern of mine, just because we have elderly people walking in the road because they don't feel safe walking on that sidewalk. They have walkers or they might have a cane.
I think that's very good.
And
But
that
the
has,
study was safe versus school.
yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean,
and that's always been a concern of mine going to the,
yeah. I don't know if they did it for Juniper specifically, but I think that's a good point, right? I think we can have our own kind of, we can throw our own good ideas in the mix as well.
I mean, the walkability study was instrumental in us getting both the South Street grant and the West Main grant. So being able to lean on it, even though it's old now, 18 years old. It's the last one the county did, so it's still helpful from that perspective. It doesn't help. The only reason South Street got money was it connects directly to Main. Cuba Street doesn't connect directly to Main, so we would be eligible for some of the state funding. And it's not proximal to the school. So I should say, we wouldn't be eligible for the federal funding, the Safe Routes to School for federal funding. But I think there's some state money sloshing around that Cuba Street could be interesting. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we have you reach out to the tree committee, see if there's any interest. If there's no interest, then I might still be willing to tackle some version of something to see if we can't catch Guy on a good day and say, is this limited enough in scope? And does it narrowly enough define a public need that it can kind of pass muster? At least one more shot at that version of things. Incentivizing larger community builds, I think, see if we can wrap that into it. I think that's an interesting idea. Run into funding issues quickly though.
Mhm.
It's dicey very quickly. But I mean, I do. We'll see if we can start with something specific. Right, or manifest rather than.
And just for completeness, I mean, the other thing, I think I maybe mentioned it. Certainly Ithaca is known for having like a street walk district and there's taxes specific for that. There's a whole like path you can go down that route. I don't find it particularly compelling for the village. The way I kind of think of it now, we're all paying for our sidewalks everywhere instead of trying to get it on certain districts and then have them pay more. You can raise more, but then you're also level of standard is now raised, right? Because now people are paying directly for this and kind of have an expectation of what you're going to get out of it. I don't think we're staffed in a way that we can meet that expectation reasonably. So I have a lot of concerns on that front.
Mhm.
I mean, right, like the city chose that path with very specific policy intent, and it was not just about sidewalks. And I think
Right, a lot of it was around nonprofit, owners of land and not having taxes from that.
Right, and I don't think we have that same. I mean, there is something compelling there about like the square footage of your property, but honestly, I almost feel like that is a reason not to do it. Right, the property owner is the least likely to use that square footage in front of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, well, let us know if anyone on the tree committee jumps at the opportunity.
We'll see. I've raised the question before, and there's broad skepticism, but we'll see. I'll give it another.
Solar and energy contracts.
Yes. Let's see. So a brief update on the solar front is to say that I have passed along guys, after our last conversation, I passed along guys' comments to power management. I need to hear back from them. Let's see how that continues. I did hear from someone recently that the wait list for solar may be decreasing over time, and so maybe there is slightly more supply and slightly less demand, or one way or the other on that. Which I only raised to say our management was kind of pushing, like, you don't get it now, then you're later in the queue to like line up for these things, which is not wrong. There is still a queue, to be clear, but it might be a smaller queue, so maybe it's not as urgent. I don't really know. That's on the solar front. On the energy front, so I have now talked with both power management and Constellation Energy, who gives prices for both power management and Mega, which is the group buying municipality program in New York State. Basically, right now, the village is on just like the market rate for energy. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up over the winter. You probably saw ridiculously high energy bills over the winter because it was cold enough that everyone was using more energy, prices go up, and the demand, it's very much just riding that market. You can buy, 6, 12, 18 months, up to 2 or 3 years, contracts that fix your rate at a specific dollar amount. The primary value there is to bring consistency to your rates. You know what your rate is, you're locked in. Meanwhile, the actual rate is doing this, right? And so you win some, you lose some. Sometimes you're probably doing better in the winter, you're probably doing worse in the summer. Depending on how international wars go and federal policies, who knows, those numbers go up and down. It felt very quickly like just trying to play the stock market to me. Like, I don't really know how to make any of these calls or decisions. Depending on who you talk to, power management feels much more confident in their ability to project forward. They have a lot of fancy graphs. It feels very nice. The mega guy was like, it's a crapshoot. No one fucking knows. I kind of appreciated his perspective more. He said you could do things like fix half of your amount and not the other, and kind of blend it. Like, so there's all these different interesting things. I think what I'm asking here is probably the biggest question is if we, and I don't know if we have a straight answer to this right now, like if we feel that the fluctuating cost of energy is a burden to us from like a cash flow level or some other sort of budgetary concern, where fixing that month-to-month cost would be beneficial to the village. If so, that's an easy question. Then we should figure out, lean on them to figure out when's the right time to kind of buy in. We're coming off of the winter peak, probably not right now, but give it another month or two, lock in, and have a great day. Otherwise, if this is not, if like we don't have a pressing issue, kind of inclined to just say, forget it. We could jump with one of these groups and really have them lead us and make some calls, and maybe we get a good deal, maybe we don't, who knows? And I don't know that I need to play that game. But if we have interest in that or feel like we've got a reason why we might feel confident and maybe that's their smart money to be made there, I'm also open to that. But I personally have a strong vision of what that looks like. So there's the one question on kind of month to month fluctuation risk, and there's the other, like, more broadly, do we want to look more deeply at this? We spend around 70,000 a year on electric, so it's not nothing. It's not wild amounts. I mean, you're not going to save all of that, right? So what are we talking about? How much we really save if we locked in? I couldn't give you that, but I don't imagine it's more than a handful of thousands of dollars if we're on the good side of locking something in. So, thoughts or ideas on that front?
Energy front, I'm fairly indifferent. I mean, I came away with the same, I don't know, hopefully you're talking about Jim. Hopefully
Yeah,
that's the-
yeah, Jim is,
So, I mean, I came away with the same general takeaway, which is like, I don't trade commodities. And I don't know why energy would be any different. Like, this is clearly not my skill set. But for solar, I feel like that's an easier.
I feel like it is an easier, straightforward, like, savings. I think where I'm stuck is the magnitude of that savings is still relatively small, just because we're not a huge energy user. Like, if we were a large manufacturing organization, it would be different. I think where I'm there is like, if they come back to me and they're like, yep, guys, comments will totally make sense. We can make these changes, good to go. Or that, and there's 1 or 2 questions you need to sort out. I'm happy to work through that. If they come back and they're like, well, let's talk. And I'm just like, I don't know if it's worth my time to save a few $1,000s. And to support solar. Like, those are both goals that I'm married to, supporting solar and saving taxpayer dollars. And yet there is a trade-off at some point of like, how much time is that actually?
And
Guy's cost is not negligible.
right, well, that offsets any savings very, very quickly. But am I remembering correctly that in the solar conversation, there's the power management version, and then there's also, that's community solar, but then isn't there also the opt-in where there's a separate overlapping, potentially not mutually exclusive option that you can go with? Is that correct?
Don't know. What I'm aware of is the community offsite solar. And because we have different like power draws, like the village hall would be through one contract and like the power or the pumps and like the sewer. They were still basically solar. And Jim at Mega / Constellation was also looking for other bids too for me, because I was like, oh, we do that too, okay.
Yeah,
Let me know about that, so,
well, thank you, for following up.
yeah. Any other thoughts or ideas?
I'm gonna wait and see what they, you know, what they come back with there. I think your takeaway is exactly right.
Yeah, well, as I'm assuming. Maybe someone will surprise me. I'm assuming I'm the only person in the room who actually does drink commodities.
It was a subtle like.
Yeah. So I think your point is well taken, that we're just not a large enough consumer. You know,
Right.
you know, a 20 to 30% savings, if you can time it right, which usually isn't that hard. I mean, when oil was at 150, you kind of knew it was coming down. When oil was at 18, you knew it had to go back up. So if you kind of pick one extreme once, and you're a large enough user to lock in pricing, then you can see 20 or 30% differential pretty easily. But for us, that's what, 14 to $20,000 if we get it just right. That's not nothing either when we're trying to find a few thousand here and there in the budget, but that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
And the extremes are never
For 15 to 20 grand. And I think we're coming off a bit of an old electricity extreme, but timing it on the other end to say it's low enough.
Right, it's gonna go down from here, but when is low?
Right.
Like a reasonable.
Well, and again, if we were spending 700,000 a year in electricity, then I would say pick a number, 12%, 15%, 18%, whatever our number is, and just lock it in there.
Yeah.
But again, that's gonna be work. For our specific circumstance, that's gonna be a lot of work for some savings. And maybe it's something we kind of keep half an eye on. If these ridiculous NICEAG bills everybody's getting are suddenly, $50 instead of 500, then maybe we say, hey, is there anyone who will lock us in at this rate? And we probably find out there isn't.
Yeah, I mean, that is an opportunity too, honestly, both of them said now it's too high still, so like don't really do anything right now. There is a number of different decisions of your energy bill is like 50% the actual cost to build it, and then 50% a whole bunch of other things that are sliced into like diminishing other smaller slices of pie. And you can lock in like actually any one of those or any group of those, and it's all like, who knows? So there's a lot more decisions, but we could kind of kick the can and say like, hey, if at some point it feels like we're just burning money if we don't lock in and something's happened and you're like, no, this is really a thing, reach out to us, we can have a conversation. I think it would probably be, we would be in a place where we'd be slower to say yes to that, and therefore wouldn't be able to capitalize like at the rock bottom price, but maybe it stays around long enough. Anyhow, we could say, reach out if something seems really obvious that we should be doing there. But in the meantime, don't worry about it.
We can also, I know Terry would be happy to just say, right, the county does the mega, right, bulk purchase. And, they do play the commodities market, so I think it would be easy to say, Terry, let us know when you're going into bid with this next, and just keep us in the loop, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that mega or power management would be particularly good at that, but I know that Terry would be sensitive to, right, sort of where we are.
Yeah.
I actually gave this some thought a couple of years ago. The real answer to energy savings, which again, I don't know that we have the scale for it. We certainly don't have the money for it. But the real answer to energy savings is municipally owned, self-contained solar grid. And our village-wide use is not so large that we would need one of these giant solar farms you see on your way to Horseheads. We wouldn't need anything that big. We would need a lot, but nothing that big. I just haven't figured out a way to pay for it yet.
I love that conversation so much. So much.
All right, well, what I'm hearing is I will get back to Constellation and Power and say. We're not, this isn't a pressing issue for us. If something dramatic, like it would be silly not to pay attention comes through, let us know, but we're not really looking to try and chase. Every last penny on this, nor are we looking, or nor do we find ourselves in a situation where. Keeping a consistent month-to-month energy price is really pressing for us, and so we can just see. Where that takes us, and then I'll let people know what I hear back from power management on the solar contracts.
Sounds good. Next item we have up is, should be fairly straightforward. I need approval from the board to sign the NIPA streetlight maintenance contract extension. Of course, we have a contract with them to for all of our streetlight maintenance now that they're on this. What's the name of this system?
Well, we were on something called,
Right, that's changed too.
yeah, that's about to change. There was something called, hold on. You know, but it's something with a C. Because it's changing thing out. So that company, Simcons, I don't know, Quantella, that was it. We're on Quantella. That company is folding or changing direction or something. So now we still have our maintenance through NIPA. But the provider that does the control plane, like web UI to like light, raise or lower the level of lighting or know when the lights gone out or whatever. That part is changing, so we'll eventually be switching over to some new product that they go with.
So all I'm looking for this evening is board approval via motion to authorize me to sign a contract extension for our streetlight maintenance with NIPA.
So
Any other comments or questions? I just have to find any.
I'll just say, we are talking with them about including the new lights that we've taken ownership over at 46 South. But that they suggested sign this, move forward, we'll make an addendum once they figured out that. Because they're slightly different and I don't know that they'll be in the same control plane or whatever, I think they're trying to figure out what's the right way to structure that or suggest that we should bring that into the contract. So we'll hear more about that later.
So if there are no other comments or questions, then all in favor of authorizing me to sign the contract extension with NIPA for our streetlight maintenance, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And speaking of lighting at 46 South Street, Kate is here to answer any questions that anyone might have. You all received my email. I heard back from a couple of you. We have a request for the village to consider taking dedication of the lights along the walking trail from the 46 South Street development to South Street. There's a walking trail there. The trail itself would remain in the ownership and under the maintenance of INHS. There would be an easement which would allow the trail to be used by the public, but it would not be dedicated to the village. But the lights would. Now the lights have been hooked up to a village-owned circuit. And so the request is that we would consider taking dedication of the lights. My guess is, I mean, they're new. My guess is there's not a lot of maintenance on the part of DPW unless a tree falls and takes out one of the lights. Eventually, certain parts of fixtures will need to be replaced. There's only.
So this is where I say that Lynn Troy, my director of real estate, has COVID. We were supposed to be here together. And so I believe there are 10 callers.
So it's not a gigantic number. So I am looking for board feedback. This is something that doesn't require a resolution or of acceptance tonight. Basically, we need to decide how to direct Guy because he's been going back and forth on these easement agreements for quite some time now. My thought is given the board has not been kept in the loop of that because it's been in conversations between attorneys. But given that this is now dragged on for quite some time, my leaning is that we would be willing to consider taking dedication of the lights. I do not think that the village would want to consider taking dedication of the trail or its maintenance, but the lights I can see because Guy did say it is in the public benefit to have lighting on a trail. I can see us being willing to accept that. So what I'm looking for is board direction to give to Guy language. Well, he won't worry about the language, but on the direction that we want to go with respect to the trail and the lighting.
I'll just jump in at the outset to say I'm staying in this conversation.
So we
Just to get that.
we would be maintaining and paying the bill for it.
We're already paying the bill.
We're already paying the bill for it. Oh, okay, well, there you go.
It's 10 lights, the electricity is not a lot.
Yeah.
The planning board approved, the plans that the planning board approved for the project included the trail and included lighting. It was less clear on who might eventually take ownership. So we have the option without disturbing that approved plan, just like we took dedication of the roads and the lights on the roads. We can take dedication of these lights. It doesn't change the approved site plan.
Yeah,
They are bollard lights this tall, just so everybody knows, right?
it's just trail lights,
And
yeah.
they're just, LED. 3-inch lights at the top of each bollard, and right now they're only on between 6 and 9, they go off, so we're talking very minimally.
Yeah.
On lights.
Well, if that trail is open to the public for all of the village to use and walk through, then why would we not?
Yeah, it would be up to the property owner to determine if, for instance, the trail should be closed during parts of the year. Is it a seasonal trail? If there's 3 feet of snow, would they want to have a trail closed sign? That would be their call. But when the trail is open, it would be the village's decision. What hours do we want the trail lighted? I think there's an argument to be made that if it's publicly accessible, lights should be on when it's dark.
Mm-hmm.
That's simple and straightforward. But the question at hand is how to direct village council with respect to our willingness to take dedication lights or not.
In the current situation, my opinion would be that the village just take over the lighting, that it be dedicated to the village. With the way things stand right now.
Agreed.
I'm for taking it over. I mean, after listening a bit more of the back and forth. Seems like the easiest path forward. I don't think it's a large imposition on the village, so I'm happy to see it move forward.
Yeah, if it was 100 lights that needed replacing twice a year, that'd be a different conversation. I think for the 10.
Lengths.
Okay. All right, then I will
Oh, you
direct.
bet.
What's that?
I don't know if, am I allowed, is this a public?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, school year. Right now. We're almost over these, we're anticipating that the major user of the trail during the day will be the nursery school, walking their kids in the right. But, we're happy to build the path, I believe I wasn't present at the time, but out of the site planning, original public engagement. Was requested by the neighbors for bird watching enjoyment, and we really want to provide that. And maintain it as such, it would be open, for everybody.
I don't know if you've heard of this, I heard the school might be looking at a path from the school to South Street. That
We
might
have
be-
heard from them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we shared with them the design and the cost and the specs for what it took to build this path so that they could have a rough comparison.
Yeah.
It is a gravel tamped down surface. So it's not fancy by any means, but I think it meets the nature aspect of it. And that, was north of $50,000, so we wanted to give the district an idea of what the cost would be. And yeah, safe route, I think it fits to the safe routes to school conversation, quite a lot that was previously addressed as a potential safe route to school.
Okay, then I will let Guy know that how to proceed. On that, and that means that will come back to us. Possibly in our April meeting, for formal acceptance
Okay.
of the dedication of the lights. Guy and INHS Council will let us know what that timing looks like. And thank you, Kate, for driving all the way out here to answer 1.5 questions. Okay. Police staffing, we have to make a hire date adjustment. Jess, remind me who and what date we want to
So what
start.
we would like to do is to amend the hire date for Taz Andrews, who was approved as a full-time police officer at the prevailing wage, effective immediately at the last meeting, to then be effective April 14th, 2025.
Okay, would someone like to make that motion to adjust Officer Andrews' full-time hire date?
So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions? None. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any other items of old business? New business. We have a resolution.
So Vern, it's really a resolution for budget modification. I don't know if those words need to be said.
Hmm.
Okay. I don't know. Gotta check.
Pulling it up here. We have a resolution to do a budget modification in the current budget year to move $29,000 from the sale of the DPW dump truck and $8,775 from the sale of a DPW work truck from the general fund to the DPW vehicle reserve. So effectively what we're doing is we're increasing the reserve contribution line in the current year budget by that $37,775. Would someone like to move that?
I will move that.
I will second that.
Any comments or questions?
So I have just a general question. Joel had emailed you. This is something that Joel and I have gone back and forth on about equipment in the EMS world. When we brought this up at our last meeting, we were talking about just vehicles where it's sort of a large purchase or a large sale rather. But I wanted to get feedback thoughts on doing a similar thing for other departments, different contexts, smaller amounts, sort of what the line is. I know for Joel is concerned primarily about, right, just really a systems design perspective, right? Creating incentives to make sure that we get the top dollar for anything that could go back into individual departments. Reserves, which to me makes sense. Logically, right, for the same reason that this makes sense. But it's not traditionally been something that we do. I think the accounting standards or the whatever standards it is, right, the comptroller's guidance presumably is just that any sales on the village's behalf go back to our general fund. So it's definitely not something that we've done. This kind of raised the issue for us.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks.
So I have some thoughts on that, which we can talk about, and let's get this piece approved.
Sure.
And then, because I have some, I haven't responded to that email, but I have some.
Yeah,
some
sure.
thoughts to-
Yep, I just wanted to raise it while it's on the table here.
So any questions about this transfer of funds into the reserves from 2 vehicle sales? And all in favor of approving this budget modification, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So my thoughts to Joel's question is. We have to be very careful about creating reserve accounts willy-nilly. So you can't just have a reserve account for this or reserve account for that. We're actually fairly limited to what we can have. Reserve accounts for. So it's easy in the case of vehicles because we have vehicle reserve accounts. I like where Joel's head is at, but for instance, if he sold, make up a piece of equipment that doesn't exist. If he sold a piece of equipment for $7,000. I don't believe it would be appropriate for us to create a reserve account for this thing just because he happened to have sold one.
Or to sell something we got out of our regular budget line, so to buy cause, it comes out of just a normal everyday budget line, and put that money into some purpose.
Right.
That was gonna be my question. It's like, if it is selling a thing that we bought a replacement for out of reserve. Like, that's the thing that seems important. Not that it's a vehicle per se, but that is a thing we've reserved for that we are selling an old one, to buy a new one. And putting the
Love that
difference back in.
that's very,
Yeah.
I think that's very accurate.
And what is a little understandably confusing and alien to people who haven't done municipal budgeting is that you can't have kind of general reserves. You can't just have an EMS department reserve.
Right.
Because all of these departments are part of the general budget. So the reserves have to be very specific. So Joel wants a specific reserve for a specific thing that he knows he's going to replace every 5 years, then he can ask for it as part of the budgeting process.
Right, I haven't looked through specifically, but I mean, we're generally talking. Primarily at least about things that have come out of the equipment, so we're talking about almost stretchers, those things that are fairly large items. There's also some smaller stuff. That I think is hard to capture in light of this conversation, but
Well, I
I mean,
think
we can look through it. and
But
look
wouldn't
through
that
it.
go back
Anything
into
after-
like equipment reserve? Like
well,
anything that had to do with the, like you say, the monitors, things like that, that's equipment that they need, that would just go back into the equipment.
That's kind of what I'm getting at this.
Yeah.
That sounds like a clear line, clear distinction that's easy to make. The harder piece is, right, 2 meetings ago, we were talking about phones. Or, other things that sort of just come out of our annual budget. And those things are,
Oh, gotcha.
I think,
Mhm.
more clearly just need to go back to the general fund, right? Or just the general purpose items that will just come out of our budget.
well, and I think the key piece here is we cannot establish a policy that would bind a future board anyway.
Mm.
So if a department head says, I just sold this thing, I paid for it out of there, can we put it back in there? We can say, no. Or we can say, sure,
Mhm.
right? And a future board can do the same. So I think Joel should feel, just like Dusty, Joel should feel free to ask. We could have said no to this, right? We could have said, sorry, Dusty, it's general fund money. And we reserve accordingly, and we have a replacement cycle, and you need to stay within this budget. So Joel should feel very free to ask. To put money he's able to recoup for the department in an appropriate reserve, if it makes sense to do so. He should ask and we should consider it.
Well, I think that's fair. I mean, what I'm hearing is asking a more general question, which is sort of the time curve of board in terms of doing that, and I think the answer I'm getting is pretty clear and easy to work with, so that's perfect.
Yeah, I like the rule of thumb that I mentioned. It came out of reserve, selling the old thing to put it back in reserve makes sense. And for the same reason that it is for the vehicles too, it's like it builds this replacement cycle and it gives them flexibility, because Dusty has talked to different points of like, well, he talks to some other DPW in the area and they're actually on a 2-year replacement cycle for their trucks, because it turns out that actually they can buy it at like a discount price for the state pricing, and can sell it back out, and 2 years later, it all works out. Like, look, man, if you want to do it, great. Like, I don't really, but like it gives them the flexibility because it's that money comes back into the cycle instead of. They never would be able to do it if they're trying to buy a brand new truck every 2 years and not being able to sell it and recoup it, right? That would be silly. So like, I think it puts the right incentives out, which is what you started with, like the right system and incentives
Right.
to
Well,
empower.
I think that's essential, but there is a piece of it that's like, I do see the line there. Where you don't wanna take something out of your annual budget lines. and then feed that back into a reserve, because that flips the incentive now, it's all upside down again, right, in a different way, but still upside down, right? And also obviously that would violate everything about guesses.
And I think if we were talking about every,
Topsy-turvy.
$200 sale, it would be a waste of our time. I think. But if we're talking about $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 things, then that's.
Yeah, so that's good.
Okay, well, speaking of EMS, the next item of new business is a request for cardiac monitor purchases.
Yes, so I'm not going to read Joel's email, which thank you for putting in there. But in essence, the last couple of budget years, we have been working on sort of bringing our equipment reserve contributions up little by little. This is sort of an incremental process. As you know, it's just the nature of the municipal budget, right? You can't jump around, unfortunately. Despite having found that we were 5 years behind probably on contributions for things like monitors, auto pulses that had never been incorporated into our reserves historically, right? So we're playing catch up. Joel has been in communication with basically the sales rep for a number of companies. So a couple of years ago, we did this with Stryker. And there was one I'm forgetting, but essentially they're releasing a new monitor in the next year or so. We have an opportunity to buy it at basically a decreased cost if we buy it in advance. And the hope is to do that now, even though we have not properly, right, we have not prepared for that in our reserve contributions. In order to do it, well, I'll start by saying, so the useful life of our current monitors has expired by like 5 or 6 years. They are still working, right? So they are still doing the job. They are okay. The technical useful life that is determined at the federal level has been exceeded. So weigh that as you will. I tried to sort of drill down on like, what does useful life mean? What does it mean that they work, but their useful life is gone? It's very, very hard to determine what that actually means, right? There's some liability questions there for sure. But fundamentally, they do seem to still be working. They're definitely outside of their range, all that stuff. But they are working, but outside of their useful life. So sort of file that away however you want. But right now, like I said, we have an opportunity to buy 2 of them at a discounted rate. To do that, we would use essentially what we have in our equipment reserve to pay their first month's or their first year's payment rather. And then in our next budget year, we would be stuck increasing our reserve payments. So we'd be making a decision in advance in a way that to me feels very uncomfortable. But for the benefit of having to replace this old outside of its service life equipment, again, I don't know. It also has the sort of added positive externality of then we would have 4 monitors. So it would allow us to equip our fly car with a monitor, which is the last step needed to make that fly car fully ALS compliant and capable. And in a world where we end up with 3 ambulances in the near to distant future, however that plays out, we would then have 4, potentially 4 monitors, again, enough to equip a full ALS bus, however we do it, whether it's fly car or an ambulance. So that's kind of the pitch. I'm trying to make it less pitch and more just here are the facts. This is, I think, something that Joel would very much like to do, but is aware of the difficulty in budgeting.
So the service, the 5-year service plan, that's due up front. That's an annual fee where.
Why am I not seeing the price?
So those are separate. There's a separate document.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the
6B, file 6B is the service plan. What's in the,
Why am I not seeing?
what's in that monitor reserve?
It will be. Like 25,000, including this current budget year's allocation, which is not. So there's 15 in there now, there'll be another 10 out of it, so
And
25
how much should we budget in the proposed budget that we're about to notice?
for 25, 26.
I don't know exactly what it was, but it's increased.
Another 10,008.
Holy Hannah.
Wait, no, that's the maintenance reserve.
That's what he was asking about.
I'm asking.
No, the equipment reserve. So the maintenance reserve is. the-
So there's no such thing as a monitor reserve in our budget line, so I've got the maintenance agreements and I've got equipment. I don't have
We're
a
talking about
monitor reserve.
equipment.
But the maintenance agreements would be this
No.
5-year.
So the maintenance agreement is the striker. It's a very specific maintenance agreement for others.
So 6B is the Zoll maintenance agreement.
So,
This is a 5-year maintenance agreement for the 4 monitors. Now, the monitors themselves, the terms are 5 years. That's not too bad. Whatever 118 divided by 5 is. 23. Hold on, 23,
Okay.
6, something like that. So that we could pay out of the equipment fund, reserve.
so that's taking me a little bit off guard, because I believe that maintenance reserve is specific to the striker.
I don't know, what'd you say is in the equipment reserve? EMS equipment.
If we're funded according to this current budget year, 25,000 is a good number to work with.
So we have enough money in
There-
the EMS equipment reserve to pay the first year financed payment for the monitors.
Yes.
My question is,
Do we have this?
where is the money for the,
I don't know. I have to admit that this is taken me entirely by surprise. I was not expecting this. I thought this was all wrapped into one. So this may be something that I need to go connect with Joel about, because like I said, this is,
Because the monitors are one thing and then the service plan is another.
yeah, this is
And it
this is
is
unfortunately new.
scary.
The maintenance contract says under additional language, first payment net 365. Are they thinking that we'll pay the first payment next year?
Yes, and is there not, which number is that? Quote is that?
6B with no eyes.
And I think. If you open that quote, does it not have a series of dates at the top of it that shows you that the first payment is on this 15th of June, 2025, and then, or is that one missing?
That's the other one.
dates? Those dates were supposed to have been added to
They
this.
are there, but you're confusing 2 different invoices.
Yes.
because the one we're talking about is the maintenance agreement,
Yes,
which at the top says net 30.
they were both supposed to end up having, according to Joel's verbal conversation, be changed to be paid in June.
So I'm not,
So
I think we should get the new monitors. I'm not thrilled with this process.
Right, it's absolutely not. the ideal.
I think Joel needs to A, be sitting there, and B, not be giving verbal information that may or may not be exactly what we're reading on. So I mean, there's gotta be better clarity.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Now, everything does say these quotes expire on March 31st, which is a wonderful sales tactic. But I'm wondering if he can get that pushed out so that.
End of quarter, baby.
Yeah. I'm wondering,
There's no coincidence there, and that is something that we talked through, right? I think Joel is acutely aware that this is, or at least I have tried to emphasize the. Right, the sort of workflow of how this board works. He's aware that this is a push and less than ideal, let's say.
so
And I've asked him to extend the books to see if that's possible, so.
So if we can get some clarity on all of this for our April meeting. Including where we think we're gonna pay the maintenance contract out of,
Then, yeah,
that would be helpful.
yeah,
The monitor piece, I think is fine. We have it. In the equipment reserve to pay for it.
You said that Joel reached out to like,
So I should back up, sorry, but just one thing to note is that we have the first installment in the reserve. Right, so moving forward, it would imply a substantial increase in our reserve contribution forward.
Correct.
But just to be clear, sorry, Joe, what were you saying?
I was asking if
That's all.
something. Oh yeah. Joel reached out to several vendors and this was the,
No. No, there is really only one vendor that does.
like, this is it.
This is,
okay.
There's one kind of alternative, but it's.
Okay.
It's very much not his preference. So no, it's really like a one of a kind situation.
So it's really buying the monitors and the service package that comes with it. Like that's,
So I have to admit, we did not talk about the service package as outside of the monitor purchase.
okay.
So that's new to me. I have not covered that or I'm completely blanking, which is not outside the world of possibility. No, I'll have to connect with
Yeah,
that
okay.
to get more clarity.
And I agree, I think he needs to come here.
Mhm. The other thing you mentioned earlier was, and just because I don't know how this equipment works, is putting one of the old monitors into the fly car. But if it's already past its date, wouldn't it be considered a liability to have that
So this is
equipment still?
the fuzziness on the definition of beyond its service life versus clearly still functional. Like the fuzziness between those, there doesn't seem to be a clear distinction. I think if you.
But it's still a liability, like if it stops working when there's an emergency happening.
I don't think that's entirely true, right? There's due diligence that you can do in terms of testing it, right? To ensure that it's still working. Our staff, right, are able to, do, right, to take blood pressures and do these things on their own.
Okay,
So I don't think it's just very fuzzy, honestly. It's
Okay.
it's a distinction without a distinction, kind of, right? Like there's a very large gray area.
so this equipment isn't absolutely necessary?
We have been working.
I'm just trying to understand, like,
No, you're absolutely right to, look, this is, Joel and I spent probably.
how
half an hour
severe
talking
is
about,
it
like,
that
what is happening.
we don't have
Yeah.
current equipment?
So I think there's a couple pieces. One is it's still working, right? Two, it is beyond its life, which means warranty issues and that kind of thing, like we can't really maintain
Right.
at this point, so we're riding a little bit of risk that's just built in.
Right.
The other piece, I think, is again a little bit fuzzy, right? But we operate a rural department. We have increasingly, particularly since Joel's taken over, but maybe for a long time, had sort of a reputation as being sort of training forward and proactive and I don't know, technologically advanced, maybe might be overselling it, right? But
For a rural area.
I think we're well equipped. We're not necessarily on the cutting edge, but we're at least proactive in terms of our upgrades that we use. And there's a lot of sort of cachet there and a lot of weight that carries in terms of attracting staff. So staying up to date, not falling behind is very important. It's also, I think, important financially, right? It's like buying used cars, sort of.
Yes.
The further you get behind, the harder it is to catch up. So there's all of that kind of wrapped into one. I think honestly, the biggest impetus here for Joel is just that we're saving substantially over what he expects the price will be when these new monitors go on the market in a year. Right, we're saving like 20,000 per monitor in that ballpark. Again, there's the like, we're at the end of the quarter. How much of this is the salesperson talking? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of buzz in this conversation, and not to diminish at all the gravity of it. And I wouldn't be bringing it here if I didn't think it was a good idea. But I just want to be frank about kind of the edges of my knowledge and kind of where I are.
So yeah, so it's actually going to be tight because there's going to be 2567.
Yeah, but there's another consideration that needs to be paid for from that line.
But there's 2567 after the current year contribution, then we're adding 10.
Correct.
which is barely gonna be enough for year one payment.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
I don't, you get some clarity on those pieces for us.
Can I add one thing regarding the terms for the service agreement, which was that Joel, I would ask these questions today about when was this going to be paid, what budget year is this coming out of? And he did call in that line that you all noted that says service to be paid annually, first payment, and that's $365. Was the change that was made to be updated to suggest it could be a year. So he did put in writing the thing that he verbalized. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, but that's absolutely fine. I'll follow up.
I mean, the only thing that I would add is it possible to get the monitors without this other
Service.
rate?
You absolutely can, again, because it's specialized and. we have
Or if
other
the
sold
service
equipment.
can be from another company?
Fortunately, again, it's very, very specialized and it's one of these things where you sort of damn if you do, damn if you don't. So we've had equipment that had passed its warranty period or had passed its the service agreement. And then, it needs some minor thing. It's just immensely expensive, but because they have a complete monopoly on that market, there isn't a lot of recourse.
Okay.
So we have to buy the extra service plan? Does it come with any warranty at all when you buy the monitors?
So there's a warranty, I believe, but the service plan is over and above and they
It's 1 year,
come out and they fix
1 year
it.
warranty.
Oh,
Yeah, there's also preventative maintenance in the service plans. Generally, I'm extrapolating
Yeah,
from what I know.
right.
Or other, like I said, this one is.
And it's a 5-year plan for the one-time 38,000 proposed here. It's not an annual 38,000. Is my understanding of the service agreement. Right, you're buying one 5-year contract.
But I'll follow up with you.
Okay. Police grant funded purchase. I think we have a deadline to spend some money, yes?
Yes, so this is for walkie-talkies to be purchased in the amount of $8,508.93. And most of that would be coming out of the grant money that we received earlier this year. And so what would be coming out of the equipment line is $573.93. And so I am making,
What am I?
So you want to be looking at the Bright and the Blue Storm,
oh, okay.
which would pertain to the tech grant already received and approved by the board.
These are cameras.
For DACA cameras and then computers for the,
so it would only be the Motorola things that are, we already,
are you talking about the difference that would come out of the equipment line?
no, the only thing that we're approving is the walkie-talkie or the radios, the Motorola radios. Everything
Oh,
else
okay.
we've already,
I don't know if I put that in Dropbox. Are those in Dropbox? I don't know that.
I don't see radios in Dropbox.
Yeah,
No.
I don't have that for
Okay.
this discussion.
let me see. I'm gonna share this. I'm just going to forward the email just because I. Just forwarded the email that I received.
Okay, there it is. 2 more rolls, radio, okay. Yep, there you go. Yeah. Let's do it. Looks like we're piggybacking off of a Thomas County DOER purchase. So we're getting county pricing. Radios and lots of accessories.
So then it's all three. We can do all three. We can do the cameras and then he had some left over and realized he could get the Motorola. And that would bring us just a little
The
bit over.
cameras we already approved.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is, yeah.
The cameras we approved a few months ago, so it's
No,
only
this is for the DPW. I'm just gonna stop.
Sorry, no, it's
No,
for
this is for the-
police.
No,
All
I
right, so-
know.
So, yeah, so looks like,
I got you. Okay,
There's more cameras.
I don't think he sent me the information for that one.
okay. If you want to make that motion, Joanna, that'll be,
Yes, make a motion to purchase Motorola radios for $8,508.93. With $573.93 coming out of the equipment line.
okay, motion. Second, any other comments or questions?
Just the. I think the friendly amendment, but that's radios and associated equipment, maybe
So there's
Radios and accessories.
accessories.
Yeah, radios and associated accessories. Is that friendly amendment acceptable?
I'm sorry.
Van offered a
Sorry.
friendly amendment to make the resolution to purchase radios and associated accessories.
Associated accessories, yes.
Any other comments or questions? Here, none, then all in favor, please say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
So just is correct. She did remind me that there were additional purchases. To the cameras. So we did purchase several cameras for different areas of the village offices. And the chief and I did discuss really early this month, which is why I forgot about it. To purchase additional cameras to be looking over DPW. And I did forward those items as well, except
Those
I,
are 6C.
Yeah, those are actually in the.
oh, those were in the thing, okay. I'm sorry,
Those are two, actually. there's
The
two
blue
others.
storm and then the
That's
bright.
blue storm. Bright is for the products.
It's for the computers for the cars. Yeah, for the police vehicles.
that one we did not talk.
So there's a chunk left in the tech grant. Initially, the chief isolated getting the Verdaka cameras you just mentioned and for the DPW as well as the computers for the cars. And that would have left enough to then make the Motorola purchase, but needed 573 from the equipment line. So 3 of these items largely coming out of the LITEC grant with some needed for the equipment line. And Gordon, perhaps I've overcomplicated it. I was under the impression that we have there's a grant, but the departments, it still has to be approved to spend the money from that grant. Okay.
you have to approve the purchase of the equipment specifically.
Okay.
Okay, so Joanna, do you want to make a motion to make each of these purposes, yeah, make each of these purchases as
Yes.
proposed?
Okay.
I will make a motion to purchase, let me get this correct.
Do the cameras first.
The Blue Storm Verdeka for $3,253. Equipment.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second,
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next up.
And a motion to purchase computers for the police cars at $2,813.
Maybe not. I have 5,700.
Yeah, it's all the way at the bottom.
5,700.
Oh, sorry,
Yes. $790.
$5,790.
We have a second. Comments or questions?
That would be for two.
You, where the Tahoe computer is cheaper. Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, all in favor of using this grant money to purchase computers for the 2 police vehicles, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Any other grant money we can spend?
That was it.
Item 6D on the agenda is an auditor proposal. So I got an email from Dwayne.
Yeah.
Thought I had put in the Dropbox, but I didn't. So the email from Dwayne was last week. Insero is changing some of their processes. And so I'll summarize Dwayne's email. They've almost wrapped up our fiscal year ending 2024, May 31, 2024 audit. He'll be presenting that to the board in the next few weeks. And Insero has been doing our annual audit for many years, but they also have increasingly over the last decade provided other assistance to the village when we need it from a financial standpoint. They are offering or suggesting that we take a different approach to their services going forward. They do this for some of their other smaller municipalities. And it aligns with state comptroller guidelines, but removes their restriction on how much support they can provide to the village, because as an independent auditor, they can't really do our books and audit themselves. So when in the past, and you know, anytime Jessica has a question or I have a question, they have to tread a fine line between telling us what to do, because then they're going to turn around and audit us.
Right.
So what they're proposing that he would like to change as of the end of this May would be that they would, Insero would prepare the village's financial statements as they do for our audit. But it would simply be a financial statement preparation rather than an official audit with a, what's the term of that letter?
Letter of management? No.
The audit findings letter,
Mhm.
that cover letter. Dwayne says we would avoid time spent on complying with auditing standards, which reduces their overall time and our cost. They would not need to be concerned with their independence to the village. This has in the past limited the amount of assistance and guidance we've been able to provide. If we were preparing and not auditing the statements, this would not be an issue. If we were no longer required to remain an independent auditor, we would also be able to provide more regular assistance. We could arrange quarterly or semi-annual visits, check on the overall status of the village's books and records, and include adjustments where needed, and work with Jessica to ensure that the statements are appropriate. The statements themselves would be nearly identical to what you've been receiving. The only changes are that there would be no auditor's opinion, and each page of the statement would have a disclaimer that no assurance is provided. We would do the same work to ensure the statements are appropriately presented, but by not adding the auditor's opinion, we can limit our time somewhat. New York State Office of Comptroller does require that the treasurer's function be, quote, audited, since that office is collecting funds, but the level of auditing required is much different than what we've done. OSC has a publication with a checklist of procedures, And I would propose that we perform those procedures as an agreed upon procedures engagement. So he's suggesting that we take it down a notch from a formal audit annually. To this level where they are effectively acting as the village CPA in compliance with state comptroller guidelines. Says if you would like to continue with the full audit as we have always done, the fee is going up to $21,000 a year. If we agree to the preparation and agreed upon procedures described above, we would propose a total fee of $14,000 a year for the financial statements, $2,000 a year for the state comptroller procedures portion, and then $1,000 per visit as needed, whenever we want him to come in. So I asked for clarification. I said, if we move forward as you've suggested, would you recommend any type of full independent audit every few years as a best practice? Dwayne says, my own personal opinion is that it's really not necessary. If the village is doing the state comptroller's checklist and having the statements prepared by a CPA, the full audit is not worth the additional time and effort. So that said, a few of the municipalities we've been working with are still planning on doing a full audit every 3 to 5 years. I certainly would not recommend more often than that. So not something we have to decide tonight. We've got till the end of May, but I wanted to run it by the board. I think there is an advantage to having, you know, a village accountant available for the more mundane day-to-day stuff. So as historically they've been helpful while being conscious of not violating any auditing protocols. I think it's probably still worth it. Just, you know, we're one of the very few municipalities in New York State that's been doing annual audits. I mean, we're probably on a list of, I think last time I asked anyone, it was a dozen-ish municipalities in the whole state that do annual audits. I don't know how that practice started. Well before my time. I like the idea of having it done every so often. I think it shows good faith on our part to do that. But it's also completely necessary.
Yeah. I think it started, I do recall the time, because I'm old. But it started back when we had a lot of problems in our office with bookkeeping. Within a certain period of time, I think it was like between 3 and 4 years, and things really got messed up. And I think that's when we had the auditors come in and do that. So I think, you know, like you said, we've been so good about the auditing, and our bookkeeping is amazing. And I think we could go with an independent audit like every 3 to 5 years, like you said, and then just go by what he recommends. I would think that would be logical. We're not avoiding being audited every year, or, you know. And like you said, if you know, just have our own CPA that stays within the guidelines that we're required to stay within, I think that would be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I think there was just a sense of urgency at that time that things really needed to buckle down and get looked at. And you know.
This might be a naive question. Does this have any overlap with the financial planning defense zero that we work with from time to time? Are they completely different roles and responsibilities, or is there some amount of overlap?
So the auditors themselves, there's a Conrad, and who's the other one?
New fellow Matt.
Yeah, they come in and kind of, they do the, what I'll call the digging through everything. Dwayne kind of oversees, although there's someone else. Who's the other email we get?
Jacqueline, she's new this year.
So I think it's kind of like when you get your taxes done, and there's a preparer that puts it together, and then the CPA kind of blesses it. I think there's a lot of that, but Dwayne is so familiar with everything that he's kind of taking the lead on this. I think I mean, there's a lot of overlap between all of that. I think.
I just didn't know if by opening up their ability to help us more, maybe they. Maybe more questions and concerns, you know, their way, I don't know.
Oh, 100%.
I've been very happy with Wayne and not as happy several times.
Yeah. I think. I would probably, if we go down this road, I would probably insist that, you know, it be Dwayne that answer our questions. I think that would be fair.
Well, the billing seems like $1,000 a visit, but there's an instrument, how much per email, you know what I mean? Like, are we in a guide billing situation where we're gonna get, you know, hourly bills for questions? I mean, I think my question would be to Jess is, to me, that sounds obviously like a good and improved arrangement, right? We can ask more frank questions and get more frank responses that are more helpful. But I'm curious to know your.
What was the, and Gordon, I missed, what is the, like, what's the service arrangement? Like, how many phone calls? I missed that chunk of.
There's no, it wasn't anything, it wasn't spelled out how often. It
Okay,
was a site visit, so if they come out to. Come out to do some of what they've done in the past, I think they feel that. Mike, and I'm reading between the lines, I think that they feel that they've gone beyond the scope of what they've charged us for often enough. And they are working with the smaller municipalities to adjust the fee structure, so they're doing less of the intense audit work. And more of the. Slightly more casual, helpful work. That makes sense. To include, I mean, preparing the financial statements is not nothing.
so that would definitely, I think, then to answer without knowing the specific details, your question of, right, do they need to be here for a week? It's 5 days for the two of them and not 8-hour days, say 5-hour days. Going through and combing through to do the full audit and taking the test samples to make sure the OSC would be satisfied with their audit versus some amount of that. Preparing the prep work for someone's final audit, but we can check in more regularly and feel like that's an easy answer to prevent any errors in those tiny little ways. Makes a lot of sense to me. Especially, and I missed the total price tag difference, but it was current or less of.
Some marginal decrease.
It's like $5,000 cheaper to not do the full-blown audit.
Yeah, that's not.
Right.
But also more useful for you, right? Is my presumption. Because I feel like we leave these meetings and it's like, can you check in with Wayne?
It's
Fair,
more,
right?
yeah, but he answers and we never had
He
additional
doesn't-
billing
he
for that.
doesn't bill us for those.
Yeah,
He's never billed us for that. The phone calls, the
Right.
emails.
I just mean, would it be useful to you to like,
but I feel like I
Yeah,
could call
check
him
in.
more than I do already. I don't know, maybe. I just do anyway. I email. Let's say I have 2 inquiries a quarter. I don't ever actually call
you're
him
not
that much.
limiting it?
I'm not limiting it also because there's NICOM. But with that level of audit prep, which then does go through a very rigorous, the annual financial reporting through the Office of the State Comptroller uses the information we gather from there. And they are also helpful if you find issues that were within your data. Is that substantial? I'd be comfortable signing off on that statement to the OSC. If that's an answer. And I want Dwayne. We get to keep Dwayne.
I'm in favor. Or wait until.
Wonder how long. He's got left.
Can't be a lot.
Interesting.
What could be? The CPAs ever retire?
Yes, they do. How long have we had Dwayne? So they don't rotate. Within the,
And I think they're, I don't know this for a fact, but I think they're structured like a law firm, so we're his client.
oh, okay.
It feels that way.
All right, well, and then I will tell Dwayne we're happy to take his recommend, I mean, this is recommendations.
Mhm.
That direction, and then we can think about finding someone else. I know a couple.
When you do want to do.
When we want to do a full-blown audit, I mean, we have to have one for the consortium, so we use some group out of Syracuse,
Okay.
and that won't be cheap. You know, that'll probably be the $30,000, $35,000 version.
But if we say 5 for engineer, we wait 5 years to do it.
Right, we can say that money.
Yeah. I forget about that extra 5,000.
Solar
Fund
savings.
For audits.
Solar
That
savings.
won't draw any skeptics.
Do you don't need, do you need a motion there or no?
No.
You're just sort of shifting an existing, okay.
Okay, so we have an item in the Dropbox labeled additional item. As some of you know, we have had a somewhat long-standing issue with some employees and their status and accrued time in New York State retirement system. Just looking for a relevant. In 2019, we, at the request, well, chief's request for a couple of our full-time officer, when we went to full-time police officers as opposed to part-time, it was deemed attractive to opt into a different state retirement program that allows for police officers to retire after 20 years of service, regardless of age. Every other village employee is in what is sometimes referred to as what used to be referred to as 30 at 55. If you have 30 years of service, you can retire at 55. Of course, now in tier 6, you have to wait till you're 62, regardless of time served. But police and fire have their own retirement system, which allows for either a 20 or 25-year retirement, depending on which one the municipality opts into, if they opt into it. So back in 2019, Chief asked that we opt into what's referred to as 384D, which is 20-year police retirement. We did. Got confirmation from New York State. It was believed that everyone in the department who was a full-time officer was now in that retirement system. It was discovered, unfortunately, about a year ago, maybe a little bit more now, that that was not necessarily the case. We did a lot of back and forth, a lot of searching of files, Jessica did a lot of legwork with the state comptroller's office, and the conclusion has been that the comptroller's office certainly does not accept any responsibility for any mistake. It may or may not have been their mistake. Not casting aspersions, but the end state of where we stand is that we have 3 officers in the department who should be in 384D, who are not in the eyes of the state of New York. The only resolution to this is legislation. It is going to be, I've been talking to Anna Kellis's office for several months about this. It is going to be a multi-step process that starts with this resolution. We need a resolution explaining the situation and requesting of Anna and Leah Webb that they carry legislation to move specific officers by name into 384D. Anna's office is working on getting those bills drafted. Once they have our resolution in hand and the bills are drafted, then they will request a fiscal note from the retirement system stating how much, if any, additional contribution the village must make to catch these officers up into the correct retirement system. Then those numbers come back to the village. We have to formally approve that we will accept those payments. Then the members can introduce the legislation where there'll be a signed up bill number on the assembly side and the Senate side. Then we have to adopt a resolution stating by number the legislation we would like them to carry. And then there's something which wasn't explained to me that Jessica will need to do as the village clerk to fill out a special home rule request form that goes to the legislation, or goes to the legislature. To both houses. And so we're looking at. I told you this is gonna take a minute.
No,
So we're looking at all of this year probably to get this done, but if we move things quickly enough and we get lucky. Maybe we can move the timeline. So that's the reason for the. Additional resolution in. The Dropbox. Questions?
A lot of red tape to go through.
If there's any questions, there's general frustration, but I think we all know that.
Yeah.
Probably didn't say it out loud. My only question is in the interest of properties and documents, should we read it?
Yeah. Okay, so the resolution the resolution in front of you is a resolution requesting placement of certain officers of the Trumansburg Police Department in the New York State Local Retirement System 384D retirement plan. Resolution reads, whereas the village of Trumansburg opted into the Neisler's 384D retirement plan in 2019 for officers of the Trumansburg Police Department. And whereas certain officers of the Trumansburg Police Department have nevertheless not been reflected as members in 384D. And whereas the village has been unsuccessful in its attempts to seek administrative relief on this matter. And whereas legislative relief is the only remaining means to move the aforementioned officers into the correct Neisler's retirement plan. Now therefore be it resolved that the village of Trumansburg formally requests that Assemblymember Anna Kellis and Senator Leah Webb introduce legislation to move the following police officers of the Trumansburg Police Department into the Neisler's 384D retirement plan. Those officers are Officer Mackenzie Covert, Officer Daniel Ostick, and Officer Kevin Notarfonso. Would someone like to move that?
So moved.
second.
Second. Any comments or questions?
Read.
Yeah.
Oh, cute
Nice.
guys.
That's good.
Plan that, good wording.
That was in the script.
Hearing no additional comments or questions, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Jess, I'm gonna need a certified copy of this
Yes, sir.
tomorrow, please.
You get it.
And you can tell Chief for peddling. as fast
Moving.
as we can.
We're moving.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other items of new business? Second public comment period. Comments from any members of the public present in person or online?
Commentary, just, you may feel odd that I say it is a pleasure to be here in your presence. And to hear all of the business that you take so seriously. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Wild Robot, which I've watched several times these past 6 weeks with all the grandchildren. And one of the lessons in there is about speaks to efficiency is being exclusionary. So I appreciate that your focus here is not on efficiency in a short meeting and agenda, but rather on inclusionary and sharing all the important information in the deliberation that in the time that you take to be serious and intentional about the work that you do here. It is a pleasure to be here and see all of that and experience it. It's not something I've had the experience with attending other meetings. So I do appreciate it. And it just seemed more of a focus after watching the Wild Robot. And the lessons learned in that. So gratefully, I say thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I do try to keep the meetings shorter. I'm just not always successful, but thank you. I appreciate it. If there are no other public comments, then I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters of collective bargaining protected by the Taylor Law.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right.